We're live Sunday morning, October 15th. It's April Jackson with Open Up Pittsburgh. It's Sunday Safe Spaces. And we're so happy to have you on. And of course, my sidekick, Wesley Hamilton. Hey, Wes.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. We have a really exciting conversation for everyone today.
Yes. Wes, I was thinking about us. I told you I was thinking that. And then I'm proud of us, particularly me, because every month I'm like, we can do this again. And 3 years? Is it 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah, we keep making it happen. So
thank you for being my partner and encouraging me to continue on.
Absolutely. These conversations are needed, and I feel like it's great the way that we do it. So shout out to everybody that's been sticking with us as well.
Yes. We have big plans. We do. We have big dreams, big plans. Wes and I said we're going to have a power meeting in December. And so we're really happy to be here with you all. And we have an amazing guest, Rebekah Diaz. You see her on the screen, and I consider her a friend, a neighbor, literally. And we have been conspiring on things, and we have a passion and a love for the arts. I've been so happy to work with you, Rebekah, to be included in the opera spaces. I've been able to give talks for you, and we're conspiring to do big things with the Pittsburgh Opera. And also, we all have this commonality, Rebekah, Wesley, and myself. We are consultants. We do coaching. We really help companies and people learn what DEI, JB, ADA, accessibility, all of that, what it really means and what it really looks like. And we are in the trenches as 3 people of color. We talk about things that are real, that are tangible. And so, Rebekah, I would love for you to introduce yourself to our Sunday Safe Spaces group.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm really honored to be in the space that you've both created. And I'm so happy to hear that it's been 3 years. That's amazing. So good for you. I love that. That's excellent. I'm Rebekah Diaz. I'm a certified diversity executive. I work primarily in the arts spaces, a lot of performing arts for the most part. I'm living here in Pittsburgh, not too far from April, and just really excited to be here and try to find ways that we can use this platform of DEI as a service for people and as a connector. Making sure that we are aware of the differences we have, but how can we make bridges between those and find those secondary dimensions that really kind of connect us? And that's kind of my goal. My mission is inclusion. So I'm glad to be here and talk about that.
So excited. We have some other commonalities. So first of all, we are all artists. Wesley's cracking up. We are all artists. Rebekah, can you please share your artistry?
Yeah, so for the majority of my life, for a good 20 years, I was an opera singer. I performed across this country, and I performed in South America for a good amount. And I only retired from the arts maybe about 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. And now I'm on the other side of things. I do community engagement and I.D.E.A. for Pittsburgh Opera, but I still have that love in my heart for the arts, and so I like to surround myself with artists as much as I possibly can. How about y'all? What's your art, Wesley? What do you do?
It warms my heart. So I grew up a dancer. And when I say I grew up, from the age of 4 on, I grew up a dancer. I danced in Beverly Hills with Al Gilbert. I went to Hollywood High School for Performing Arts. What is my claim to fame? Empy Hamilton was my classmate. I danced on point. I went to college. I minored in dance. And I grew up in the arts, very submersed in it. And I did give it up. Well, even after college, I continued to teach, I continued to perform, and that was my love and my passion. Now, if you ask me to sing, definitely dancing. And I still teach ballet, I still jump in, and I see me teaching yoga as an extension of practice. I like vinyasa because I like choreography, and it just speaks to my soul. So, Wes.
Hey, y'all got me beat. I don't even
You're actor, honey.
I have no talents like that.
Okay? That's not true, Wesley Hamilton.
I'm definitely not talented like that. I'm just I don't know. I feel like, April, it's hard to kind of put one thing into what I think is the arts in a sense. I look at, I'm very creative. in a lot of ways. You know, I like to write. I think that's where my talent and my goals go into. But I'm intrigued about this singing. And the reason why is because I don't think a lot of spaces, and correct me if I'm wrong, are very diverse when it comes to opera. Or at least for me, it wasn't ever represented like, oh, let's go to this arena or something to hear this type of singing. Sorry, April, I have to dive in because my mind started.
Yeah, I want you.
And so, like, are the spaces diverse? Have they started becoming more, or is it just the lack of knowledge in certain areas that yeah, could you share more?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such an important topic right now that is finally really getting like dug into across the opera field. Especially since the murder of George Floyd, it really kind of put a button on the fact that diversity in opera has been an issue. And it isn't for lack of wanting there to be diversity on the stages. It really is a socioeconomic barrier. And so when we think about opera as an art form, it is very expensive to get into opera. The voice lessons that you take, they're upwards of $100 to $200 an hour to take voice lessons. You go into these conservatories and these programs that are expensive and traveling around for auditions. And so the barrier, unfortunately, as we know, really did hit people of color in a more, at a broader way, even though it's very unbalanced, because we see that that's the demographics of what most people of color are. I myself am from the South Bronx. You know, my mother was the one, my single mom was the one who kind of got us into the arts. And I was very lucky to get scholarships and people that invested in me and took a chance. And I might have been like the lowest in the totem pole, but I have people that helped me kind of rise up through the arts, which I think the arts is great that way, that there is a lot of inclusivity and there's a lot of intentionality with wanting to help. What we're seeing now is that a lot of those barriers are going away. So for instance, at Pittsburgh Opera, there are these things called resident artist programs. And it's a great way for young singers to kind of get their feet wet and get into a company to get their first time on the stage. Traditionally, the cost of even submitting your application for those were just exponential. It was so expensive. Just like say, okay, $50 for this place, $100 for this place. So Pittsburgh Opera is one of the companies that kind of led the charge with saying, well, there's no more fees. We're not going to put a fee up for that. We're going to take anybody that wants to apply, get your application in. So it's one barrier that's being taken away is that thing there. There are a lot of more initiatives and endeavors happening with our big parent company, Opera America, that kind of oversees all opera companies in this country and kind of Canada as well, and a little bit of South America, to create these things where we are creating not only pathways for performers of color, but also for leaders of color in the field, which is also kind of, we're at a disadvantage of that. So there's a great program they have called OLOC, it's Opera Leaders of Color. And so I'm a mentor for that program where they pick three leaders a year to kind of usher their careers like through opera to ensure that they can have that access. Because the biggest issue has been access in the arts. And so we are seeing more diversity on stages. We have a way to go, but I think we know that finally. I think we're all very cognizant of the fact that we have to collectively work towards that. So it is starting to change. The landscape's changing. There's more initiatives for composers of color, librettists of color to kind of come out and tell their stories. We're seeing now, which I personally love, a big shift in there being more stories of joy for people of color on the stages. For a long time, it was about the trauma. April was even on a panel I had for an opera, a very important opera called Blue, which was about a Black officer whose son is killed by a white officer. And it's a beautiful opera. It's very, very heavy. But for a long time, those are the stories we're seeing for people of color on the stages. And recently now we're seeing more stories of celebration, of joy, of laughter, of dichotomy. And so it's really starting to see a shift now, which is really great. It's about time. So I'm happy it's happening.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Again, because I mean, of course, there, like you said, there has been some changes. Me and April started this right after the George Floyd situation. So, of course, a lot of the conversations that we've been having, I would say that we've seen a lot of growth. We've seen a lot of growth, a lot of push into the right direction. I love the fact that they're sharing stories of joy because it does push even our community in a better direction. We relive trauma by continually seeing it.
Yes.
So that is such a great thing. To kind of piggyback on that, how is the access? Well, let's put it as, because I represent at least the disabled community as well as the Black community, And so what does it look like for those with disabilities that have a voice that maybe it's a physical disability? And the reason why I share that is because mobility devices and things are utilized more. Is there a push to making like stage and settings more inclusive in that sense to provide access to individuals that are different to be on stage? Or is there like a direction and like an image that is still portrayed when you see people on stage?
That's a great question. That is something we still have to do some work on for sure. For sure. You know, there are certainly spaces for concert work more for people that have a different need that may not be traditionally what the directors are looking for their sets. But we are seeing sometimes now, very, very, very recently, where there is a bit more of an understanding of the fact that people that are differently able can be incorporated into the scene and into the setting and the time period. I have seen productions where there was an individual who needed to use a wheelchair, and so the director got a wheelchair from the time period to be used in the opera instead of saying, well, we're not going to cast that person. So it's a very individual choice at this point. There isn't any great big mandates being made for it. But individually, we're seeing some more of that. There's been a lot more done for audience members to kind of come in there and feel welcome to the space. But we need to do some work on the stages absolutely for sure, as an industry in general.
Oh, I love that. I love that because I see the push happening. And again, I always just tell people it's kind of the concept of, and just sharing, because we do have a great audience, but it's more or less of when you think of physical disabilities, it can happen to anyone. So it's kind of like having the opportunity for someone that could have been this powerful singer that might have had an accident, but now they still know that they can go back and yes. That's there. So it's like, even without looking at a group of people that might not even have been engaged in it, it's just like our everyday people, our colleagues, and how do we make sure that they still have a safe space, even if something happens to them? Because again, you can lose your legs, not your voice, right? Like it's things like that, like
absolutely,
and other ways around. So just making sure that the access is full. But I appreciate that. I just like to bring that part of the conversation in any way, because again, as things are pushing and we see DEI happening, we just need to see the disability and the diversity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's part of what brought Rebekah and I together, and our shared belief and understanding that opera, singing, the arts is for everyone, and the power that it brings, the joy is healing, laughter is healing. And I remember, I think it was at Blue, just looking in the audience, and a lot of patrons, they come, you know, they are older, right? I mean, and it was beautiful to see people with their walkers, people in wheelchairs, people having support from others to come and watch the show, because Wes and I always say that you're going to have a disability at some point. Like we're human beings. We're not infallible.
That's right.
And part of, I mean, we won't give it all away, I guess, but Rebekah and I we've been working on a project where we can bring mindfulness practices and combine them with opera and show people, like, when you sing this piece, this is the feeling it may invoke. This is how you can breathe. This is how you can move your body, no matter where you are. And we want it to, like, we don't want it. We will be bringing people together that have.
That's right. No, we will.
Yeah. All abilities to show. I think it's going to be beautiful when we bring it all together, but that's part of like our initiative and the diversity in the arts. I'm so glad you brought that up, Wes, because even though when I think of opera, I think of it as being diverse in the sense, like, I think of Italy, you know, I think of Europe, but even in those spaces, you primarily see white faces. You don't really see the African experience. You don't see people from the African diaspora. And that's, I mean, that's another reason we asked you to come on, Rebekah, because it is the last day of Latin American Heritage Month, you know, and you're Latina.
That's
and
right.
I wanted to represent.
Well, yeah, so thank you, April.
I wanted to represent like my powerful Latina sisters, you know, who I have an affinity for. And I thought it was beautiful, like my Latina sister from the South Bronx, you know, you're not J-Lo, but you're Rebekah Diaz.
We were only one train stop away from each other, apparently.
See?
So there you go.
See? But it's a beautiful story to hear how you came from our experiences and you sang opera and you've traveled the world doing it. Like that's beautiful, and it shows the possibilities. Now, how are you feeling? Like I told you in our prep, Wes and I are always about, first of all, our talk today is about we're not a monolith, right? Like we all have a shared experience in this country because of, you know, the white supremacist system. However, we're so diverse in who we are and our abilities and what we bring to the table. I want to represent you because you are my sister, you are our sister, but you don't represent all of the Latinas. And we want people to know, like, don't just celebrate a month, you know, celebrate forever. How does that land with you? How does that resonate with you?
I'm so glad you brought that up, April, because it's a really interesting thing. And I think it's also very specific to Pittsburgh, especially of all the places I've lived. And I'm sure you can relate to this in West U as well. Pittsburgh is such a wonderfully welcoming place, and I do love living here. We are so lacking in diversity that it is difficult for people to understand that within a diverse group, there is more diversity within that group. And that, for instance, with being Latina, I am not Indigenous Latina. I have African heritage and I have Spanish heritage, and that's my Latin background. I'm Puerto Rican, but there are others that have Indigenous background. There are some that have Indigenous and African, and that have Indian background, and that have like from India. And there's all of this different Middle Eastern and things like that. But we have this issue where we sometimes see someone and we want to immediately figure out, like, well, what are you? Where do you fit in this little box? How can I categorize what you are? And how do you make my mind comfortable knowing what you are? So in my experience in Pittsburgh, I've got a lot of questions, very kind and polite and from a good place that will say, well, are you Mexican? You know, are you Polynesian? Like, what are you? And it's this very curious place. But I do, and it's not just from people that are white, it's from people across all different kinds of backgrounds, because we need to create more of that bridge building here when it comes to diversity. It's so siloed, and I think we can do a better job of breaking those silos down if we have those conversations and if we lean into that. Now, the idea of you know, we do celebrate certain pockets of people this month. This month is celebrating this month. This month is that month. This month is that month. And that's great. A great start. That's a great way to kind of bring attention to it. But I always say, well, how are you going to bring that into the rest of your life? How are you going to bring that into the rest of your year? You know, I always say to people, what are you going to learn this month that is highlighted by this group? That's going to be the one little spark that you now are going to incorporate into your everyday life, so that it becomes a routine, that it becomes a normalcy, that it becomes part of your culture a little bit now, that you get that integration to it. So if I can challenge everybody out there to use these months that highlight people's heritage, that highlight their diversity, their background, their orientation, their needs, and say, okay, what's the one thing? I'm not just going to go out and eat tacos. I'm not going to go watch a movie, you know, that's Latin. Do that too. That's fun. Have tacos and have a movie night. Absolutely. But what are you going to do after that? What's the one thing you can hang on to that's easy? That's like a simple, easy thing you can do as you go on in your life. That's kind of my thought on how we can use this in a positive way, and not just a one-off.
I love that. And I'm writing that down for our monthly newsletter. That will be the quote from you, Rebekah. Like, what's the one thing that you can hold on to? I really do like that, because
something easy too. You don't have to like say, I'm going to learn Spanish or whatever, or like make a pilgrimage to Africa. Take something that you can actually do that's tangible, that you can like replicate. We always want to do like big, crazy things. It's like, no, like the small thing is what's really going to create change. So small, easy, simple. Shop at the grocery store that you don't shop at like 3 times a month. That's easy.
Right. And I think that's so, I like what you brought up, because it speaks to our humanity. And these are some really, really heavy times right now. I think of, you know, I think of you, Wes, right? Wes was literally in Israel. Was it last month?
It was in June.
It wasn't, well.
July. It was, so not too long ago. Not too long ago.
And, you know, it's like from 1 minute to now, you know, like life is short, life is precious, and human beings, we're precious too. And can you just take one thing about someone, about their culture, about their being, about whatever, and envelop that, and really really appreciate it, really love it like you love yourself, and bring it on to others. So, Rebekah, you're going to be quoted. I might lean into you, be like, send me a whole article. No. But that's why I knew it would be nice to have you on, so that you can give these little nuggets to others.
Oh,
And
thank you.
And you're right. And here in Pittsburgh, it's different. It's different. It's very kind of de facto segregated, I think. It's just, I guess every place is unique. Kansas City is
Absolutely.
unique, Los Angeles is unique, Philly, all those places. So what brought you to Pittsburgh?
Work. I went to college here. I went to Carnegie Mellon a long time ago. I won't say how long ago. It was longer ago than I care to remember. But when I went to Carnegie Mellon, my college roommate lived here. I live in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, and she was from here. So we would come out and visit her father. And she also had a very unique, diverse background. She was half Lebanese and half German. And so we would come out and visit her father. And when I would come out here and I'd see this neighborhood, this almost like Norman Rockwell painting neighborhood that I didn't even know existed growing up in the Bronx, I thought to myself, if I can ever live there, I will know that I've arrived. You create these little things for yourself. And so when work had opened up back in Pittsburgh, I made a push. My husband, he's Afro-Caribbean, and he was very skeptical about coming out to Pittsburgh. But we came out here and he fell in love with it. And now we've been here almost 5 years again. And that's the thing. Yes, Pittsburgh has its challenges, but there's something about the city where there's a desire to want to get to a place of pride, want to get to a place of being prideful that you have diverse neighbors, that you have great sports teams, that you have the best food. And it is authentic. And so it's kind of a little infectious to be around those kind of people. I mean, I'm from New York, obviously. I lived in Miami for a very long time. I've lived in different pockets of this country for short times. And there's something it's very appealing about being here. It's kind of like a very friendly, inclusive desire. Whether or not we get there is another question, but there's a desire for that. And that's the best thing, I think. If you want that, that's like half the battle right there, that you kind of really want to get there. You can trip on the way, but that you really want to arrive somewhere. I do value that from living here.
Oh, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh, that was really, really good. I was actually I had some noise going on in the back. I wasn't trying to but it's all good because it's Sunday. It's just Sunday. It's football Sunday, actually. So I'm all for it. But thank you for sharing, Rebekah. I've had some conversations. I see myself as becoming a sponge within life because, like you said, before you seen this, community, you didn't even know certain things that existed coming from where you live. And so I find that it's just the way that I start to live life now. And I have some good friends that have opened my mind up to just the different insights within culture and how complex it is. And so I do like the fact of telling people to find that one thing that can carry on and get you curious about a different lifestyle and culture, because we really don't know until we're shared things. But I would also say, when you're within your community, there's a lot of different mom and pop shops, as I would say, that really speak culture. And if you find it, you can really learn just by the people that are there, and they're willing to educate. That's a lot of people have establishments to educate. Right. I learned that. And I just highly recommend people to go, even going to events and things that might be on the west side of town or something that you might not know. Like I just did a speaking event, right? And I was talking about I.D.E.A, but of course I come from my perspective. So I'm talking about the east side. And one of the ladies came, and it was out in Anaheim. Actually.
Yeah, you were in Orange County, California.
Yeah. I was actually talking to all the welfare offices within LA County.
Okay.
So it was like a big conference. And one of the ladies, Miss Patricia, I love you. Thank you so much. came over and she was telling me her story, and then she's like, "Yeah, Wes, I'm from the West Side," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm like, it felt so good," like, and she was just, it was just the way that she just kind of went full circle. Like, hey, I understand like what you're saying, I get, but hey, it's West Side over here, and it just kind of brought it in, and it was like understanding that like there are so many differences even within our cities and our towns, and you can go to the east, west, north, south, and understand the difference. And that's where you can find establishments where you can be educated. And it's beyond the narratives that are within movies. It's beyond what you see. Right. When it comes to food, unless you're in LA, I'm sorry, but in LA, you can go anywhere and get some food that is like, one thing I loved about LA was, like I said, people always own their culture. They own their identity first. So no matter where you went, no matter what it represented, you're like, good, I didn't even think about that, right? Like, and so that's what I liked about LA. If I represent this is what I am first, you know what I mean? And so, that was, yeah. So I just wanted to kind of share because I thought that was really fulfilling. I'm still learning more about the Latino culture and what it all kind of, but I'm also learning that there are still people within learning. Same way as the African American community, the Black community. 2020 really opened up minds, and we get to be able to learn more that probably wasn't shared with us as we grew up. So just wanted to share that.
You know, Wes, you said something that I love, and April's heard me talk about this a lot, like that curiosity quotient. That is so important. I talk a lot about radical curiosity whenever I'm talking to anybody, because that is the way that we're going to move forward. If you are radically, authentically curious about something and about someone and about what's going on, that intentionality, that's how we start to figure this stuff out. That's how we start to not just do the optics-based initiatives, because you're really intentional about it. And so I always love to preach about radical curiosity, and that can be for anything. That doesn't have to be for one specific thing. So I'm going to get a t-shirt that just says radical curiosity. Wear that around. So.
No, seriously. Like when I think about food, right? Like sometimes I like food, but I'm curious of where it comes from, especially if it has a different name to it. And now I got to go get it from that source. I can't just have like the generic, right?
Yeah.
I need to get it from that source, and being that curious, even with food, of going in depth to where it comes from and the history of it, what it does is now introduce you to a whole new culture.
100%. Absolutely. Especially in LA.
Exactly. Look, April, you just love this, don't you?
I do. I'm just sucking it all in because, you know, you begin as you get older, I've appreciated more and more my experience. And, you know, as a youngling growing up in the city like that, I took it for granted. You know, I'm like, this is just the way the world is. And, you know, there's a stereotype about Californians of how we view like the world and the country. And it's like, we're the center of everything, although we're totally on the left coast. And then there's this whole other world, but I experienced so much. And, you know, that being said, Rebekah, having moved to Pittsburgh eventually, it really illuminated my experience. And not everybody has that same experience. And so it's beautiful to hear and to know, because there is a sense of safety and that communities can be their selves. I think of New York in the same way. Like there are boroughs, there are ghettos, there are pockets where people can speak their tongue, right? Because that's what it is about, being able to communicate and speak the tongue. And the foods, like there's authenticity to the food. There's a history, there's a reason, there's a love. So I really do love this conversation. There's a question, and I'll present it to both Rebekah and Wesley. Would you consider having autism as a form of diversity? That's a good question.
That's a good question. Well, I like to think about, first of all, yes, easy answer is yes. More complex answer is, if we think about the fact that we all have these intersectional identities of diversity, then there are so many aspects that create who you are. You know, I am not just a Latina. I am a whole bunch of other things that create my diversity footprint. And so if you think about autism as a layer of that, like absolutely. And it's not just that you are just a person that has autism or experiencing autism or is autistic. it is the fact that it is one of many, many things that make you who you are. That's my perspective. Wes, what do you think?
No, absolutely. I talk a lot about the intersectionalities and the multiple layers and identities that you represent. So even being autistic, you still represent other identities that I would encourage to hone into and own as well. So because it is important. So yes, absolutely, it's a form of diversity. It's within the group, but there's so many things that make you very diverse and unique for your own self.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm just going to drink my coffee and listen to the two smart people. Smart people turn me on. That is diversity within diversity, right? And even within the spectrum of autism, right? There's a diversity within that. So I very much agree with you all. I just recently, maybe I'll plug this in the newsletter, shared with our team, our Open Up team. We love to research and read and share things with people. And I don't remember the young man's name, but a young man was a nonverbal autistic young adult. He's written a whole piece, a whole orchestra piece, and they performed it. And when I'll look it up while we're talking, when I tell you it was amazing, it is amazing. And it was the first time he's been able to articulate and show his voice in this way. And my understanding is like now there's some doctors who are really researching and having to, they're wanting to work to understand, like, he had all of this within his body and within his mind. And they found a way to let him express that. So that's the beauty of inclusion, right? That's the beauty of meeting people where they are. And Rebekah, you shared a story, which, you know, would you be willing to share when you were talking about the experience you're having at Pittsburgh Opera and you asked an artist, like, what is it you need? How can we support?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So we were doing a workshop with an individual who's visually impaired. And when we kind of went there to make the materials, we have a lot of interactive, like hand-on materials. One thing that we always do is we ask the person, what do you need? Not, here is my packet of things for visually impaired people. Here you go. This is what you get. It's, what would you like us to create for you that's going to help you best? Do you want this on an e-reader? Do you want me to do this in Braille? Do you want me to find an interpreter for you? Do you need to have someone sitting next to you in the workshop to help you understand what is going to be the thing that works for you to make you feel comfortable? Not even the communication aspect, but how are you going to feel respected and not, you know, sticking out like a sore thumb in your own mind? And I think it's that conversation that has to happen. It's the questioning of it. It's not the one size fits all, or we have this one option. If you don't fit into the spectrum of that we are used to, here's our alternative. We have to create all the alternatives, whatever that's going to be for where you are and what makes you feel good while you're doing it. Because we all know, even if you don't believe that you have any challenges in your life, if you feel uncomfortable in a situation, if you don't feel the temperature in the room is comfortable, if you don't feel that someone's listening to you the way you want to be listened to, it could be any spectrum of things that are making you feel uncomfortable. It's going to really inhibit your learning process. And so taking away those barriers of how we can at least let somebody feel comfortable the way that they need to be treated, that's kind of the golden rule. You know, what do they say when you grow up? The golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated, but it actually really should be treat others the way that they want to be treated. How can we create that for the people how they feel the way they want to be treated?
No, I love that. And I love how you just shared. I have a nonprofit here in Kansas City, and you know, I've been paralyzed for 11 years. So I think of just having that experience-based approach with my organization, that we kind of just come off with empathy and knowing how to serve people without knowing how to serve them, like teach us how to serve you in a sense. And so I really love that approach. I actually start to use it in my daily life these days. Like when I'm talking to people and people, you know, say someone's venting, you know, how can I help? How can I serve you in the best way? My solutions might not be your solution. Same way it's like being in a wheelchair. Like I always tell people, some of my teaching and education is now that I have to not, when I speak, I'm like, I can't say wheelchair user, or I can't say even paraplegic. I have to say I have a spinal cord injury, because I have to acknowledge what it is because of the complexity of that. Like there's so many other things. You consider me just a wheelchair user. I could be like someone's grandparent or something like that, just that needs to use this mobility device. But most of the time people are like, oh, can you stand? Actually, for instance, I went to the hospital recently and they was doing x-rays and the guy was like, oh, can you get up? And I'm like, did y'all not communicate? Because I've been able to get up in a long time. So I guess we all gonna be surprised. But it was that I think his image of, okay, you know, this individual, whatever that perception was, right? So when we perceive things, we actually can debilitate people even more, because our thoughts might not be the things that actually help them, but it can hinder them, or it makes them relive some things that have already hindered them. So coming off with the approach of how can I help you, you might figure out that it's a lot easier than what you thought. And I think that's the other thing when it comes to like not serving people for the way they want to be served, is that the solutions become harder. We think too hard, right? Like I'm pretty sure, yeah, when we do our work in consulting, I'm like, you're thinking too hard about the job, right? Like it's not that hard. It's like you got to ask the people, how can you serve them? So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, Wes, I love that so much. And you hit something that I think is so important, you know, asking those questions, asking, how can I help? How can I serve you? Because I think we often, as people, as humans, we don't want to be shown that we're wrong. We don't want to, we want to be as expert as we can in a situation, and trying to be an expert in something is going to keep you from truly trying to help someone. If your humility is going to get in the way, then you're not gonna make that effort because you're too concerned about, oh my God, I'm gonna look stupid. I'm gonna say the wrong thing. I'm gonna mess this up. They're gonna think I don't know what I'm talking about. But if you ask that question, that almost takes the pressure off. It's like, well, we're not saying that you don't know what you're doing. We're not saying you don't know things, that you're not smart, that you have your things, but we're asking, okay, well, what can I do for you? Yeah. And I think it's a good way of just taking that pressure off.
Yeah, that radical curiosity to me leads to radical hospitality.
No, I love that.
Right. You know,
Absolutely.
I'm curious. I can I ask you questions? You know, I don't understand and I want to understand. How can I help you? And I think that is so important. I love the story you shared about the artist, that you're like, how can I support you? Because every individual is different. And you can talk to 2, 3, 4 different people who are visually impaired in some way. There can be a variety of reasons why they are and what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. Let that person speak for themselves and let them guide you as to what their needs are. And that goes for all of us, right? Like you see the optics, but me as a Black woman may need something else where I am in this stage and this season of my life compared to someone else. So let people have their voice and be intentional about it. And be intentional about you. Understand that it doesn't take away from you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And anyone that's listening, that's just on the other end, like take ownership of your identity so that they can see who you are. You know, that's very important as well. Most people, if we're all trying to chase or fit into one box because we see that box being accepted, some people can't recognize the true you. And sometimes you stepping outside that box can give other people the power to create their identity. You know, like I always tell people, like for me, you visually see something when it comes to my identities. And so I'm already projected in one way, but it's up to me to kind of come in and now show you what I really represent or what I actually own. And that's kind of how I speak. So I just honestly, because I would love to learn people and what they identify as, you know, with them being able to be that authentic and bring that to the table, because that's the only way that I can serve too. So at least the best way. I don't want to serve with my own perspective. I want to be a sponge in your world, especially if I'm being a service. If I'm being a service, I don't have a narrative for you. Like I need to know yours, right? Like that's just what it is.
No, you're right. I love that. I love that. And that's hard. That's really hard for people because I think a lot of us get into this kind of work and this service work because we have our own personal trauma or pain or experience that has driven us to want to at least rectify something in the future. And it's really challenging, I think, to say, this is not about me right now. Yeah. This is about somebody else. And I love that you said that, Wes. It's so important that you can be able to put your own narrative as a reference in the background and focus on what someone else is in that moment that's excellent. I'm so glad you said that.
That leads me to a question that I'll open up to both of you, and Rebekah being our guest, if you would like to start with it. But knowing your own self and your own story, and being okay with identifying with who you are as opposed to someone else, like, when did that happen for you? And has that been part of your journeys? I think that is, it would be beautiful to hear that from the two of you, because that is important. How do you accept who you are?
It hasn't happened yet. I think it's a work in progress.
Yes.
I think that as you get older, it's certainly, I'm getting there. Mm-hmm. I think I'm a lot closer to knowing who I am and how I want to identify and accepting who I am. Every day is closer and closer. And I think being in those circles where you're around people that okay, I can let down one more piece of this curtain, and I can let down this thing. I can open up this window and I can show this part of who I am. And that person's going to come back the next day and still be there. That really helps to support that. But I think it's a lifelong journey. I don't think that if we all just were arriving at that point, we wouldn't be even having this conversation today. So I think it takes a lot of time to get to a place where you feel, okay, I'm able to know who I am. But I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say this, almost like it's a benefit in a way when you're trying to connect with people, because you can say, I know my uncomfortability with this. And so I'm assuming that you also have your own issues with being yourself. And so we can connect on that. We don't have to talk about it. I'm not going to call you out. I'm not going to ask you those personal questions, but we connect on that humanity of the fact that it's not always easy to be your full self in every situation. That'd be wonderful. And I'm recently using this new term now. I know we love the term safe space, but I'm trying to use the term brave space now, where even when you don't feel supported, can you find that impetus to push yourself out there a little bit more? Can you be that leader to help someone else along the way in that space, even though it may not feel 100% comfortable? So getting there.
I like that candor. Thank you, Rebekah. That was good.
I really like that. I love that approach. For me, it's definitely been a journey I still am on, because I love the person I've become. I am excited to meet the person that I am becoming. And that is through daily growth, whether it's through the experiences in life or what I actually want to learn. Every day I'm open to learning something, rather it's the way that I'm treated, right? Like, there are so many things that I can understand about life and humanity just by going outside, just by maybe even getting on the internet. Like, I'm a sponge. I am a sponge. So when it thinks of me being my authentic self, I think I do bring that more to the table now, but it's just being through a lot of awareness. One, having a disability, being a Black man. Like, I think I speak a lot, but Rebekah, if you don't know, like, I acquired my disability through an altercation that led to some gun violence and me being in a chair. So my mindset and my lifestyle was limited to what I was part of my environment. And so I didn't know how to bring my authentic self. I actually felt like I just mirrored every other person that's within that community. So when I acquired my disability, it set me aside from that image, right? Because again, I'm in a wheelchair. Yeah, it could have had its own perspective about it, but it did make me understand how different I was. And it allowed me to become more aware, because now I wasn't just, of course, being judged as being Black or any other race. When you're judged on a regular, you just kind of get immune to it. But being judged as a person with a disability and knowing that was new, I was like, yeah, like it really brought me down. Like, I didn't know if I had anger for being stereotyped and stuff as just a Black man, which I did, but having this disability, it really it didn't uplift me. And what I found was like, I had to look in the mirror and accept what I saw. And I had to own it and then say I can be more. I have my nonprofit is called Disabled But Not Really. And it was because of that. Like, I took ownership of that disability based on how people perceived it. But my identity represents more, and I had to own that. And so that for me happened within, I'd say, the last 3 to 4 years. Definitely 3. After George Floyd, it was like, up, hats off, mask off, I'm whoever I need to be.
Right.
I'm tired, right? Like, but again, through time and through like experiences, even with these 3 years, me and April used this poem called the I Am poem. And I think I shared with you, April, like when I went to Israel, like I had rewrote it, and this was my first time using the poem like in person. We were just out in like a crater, and we were just, it was all right. Like it was pretty amazing where we were. But it was what was brought to the table of vulnerability. And I think just through the experience, the way that I was able to soak up that culture over there and understand what's happening even to today, the complex situation. I think I had a first like hand like in it. And it just made me say, you know what? I have to own my identity. Like even that experience, this was July, when I'm like, I have to own it more, right? Like, so I've been doing some speaking recently, and it's been like fire, you know, to hear myself speak, rather as a room of all white men, a room of, you know, not so diverse, or just all women. And I'm just like, whatever it is, I've been in different groups and been able to hear myself speak the identity that I want people to see when I'm on stage, and own it, from the trauma to the triumph in a sense. And so yes, a journey. And I think, you know, for me, it was something, that mirror. Once I started looking in the mirror, understanding that I wasn't the image that I was before, realized how different we are. And I think that was my power and that driving force for me.
I love that so much. Like hearing you talk about being your authentic self, like having your authenticity, that's infectious. That's like super infectious, because it just is, you know, it just is. Like there's no other way to say it. Like that's just so beautiful.
Yeah, so it is. You both moved me, because I do recognize as humans, we evolve, we grow, and that's what life is. It's about moving forward, right? And our identities do change. You know, there's something core about us. And that goes, you know, it makes me reflect on, we could get all philosophical, Wesley, on this exterior. It is an exterior, right? Like there is the optics that you see, as you were saying, Rebekah, but internally, like I am a person that's outside of this. This is part of it, right? The coloring, the hair, the eye color, the language, but there's just this beautiful depth to who we are. And that ongoing growth and curiosity is a beautiful thing to really evolve into ultimately who you are.
And you know, and I honestly, anyone that's watching and still thinking about this, again, I have become a sponge to life. That means I read a lot. We talk about reading a lot on here. I didn't start reading until I was about 27. I talk about that too. There's some stereotypes for me back in the day. So books wasn't a thing, but now books are everything. Why? Because there are constant stories of people taking control of their identity. There are stories of being authentic and being themselves within a book. Just learning how people can articulate or how they carry themselves, or the story that is written that they have shared, can always help you know that you are the author and creator of your own. And so I always acknowledge that. Like if you are trying to figure out what does that look like, open up a book, read a book that is based on someone's life, and listen to them take ownership of the trauma that they healed from, that allowed them to share it with you. And that way you don't have to feel like the journey you're on is truly a bad thing. What it does is it creates the reality for you, and you get to identify not only with that, but you get to identify with who you become from that. And so life isn't perfect for nobody. The ownership of your identity is understanding your life haven't been perfect. You just own it, right? Like, and so that's how I look at it. Like, and so because we can always be better. I'm not who I am today. I'll be something different tomorrow from even this conversation, right?
Right. And that's why I think it was real important, and for me, Rebekah, asking you to come on as well, because Wes and I did meet like right after George Floyd stuff, and that was a moment for me where it's like, you know what? I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to use my tongue. I'm going to use my presence to be impactful in a way that I felt was important. Like when we're going through pain, the way I healed through pain was through yoga, which is a whole nother culture. I enculturated within that because I found it's a universal piece, a universal way of being for myself. So others can benefit from it. And I had a powerful moment at Open Up. We do YTT, yoga teacher training. And I shared part of my story, and I was in my 30s before I ever had my first Black yoga teacher. And I shared that story, and there's a woman who we now work together, but she's like, April, you're my first Black yoga teacher. And I think it's powerful. We need to see reflections of ourselves. And I think it's powerful for you, Rebekah, to sit there and say, I'm a Latina, Puerto Rican, I'm from South Bronx, and I'm an opera singer. And like that inspires me. I'm not going to sing opera, but you know what I mean? Rebekah's like, no, April, sit down.
You might get it,
We can.
I think it'd be good. I think it'd be great.
Well, I'll have you train me. No. I want people to see you and say like, oh my gosh, as a woman, she did that. I'm a young girl. I want to do that. And see where it can take you. And so I appreciate you being here for that. And speaking of books and all the things, like we want you to drop some more dimes, but what are you reading? What are you listening to? What's keeping you kind of grounded and centered and in a constant state of learning right now?
Yeah, I'm going to share that. But I first want to say, like, to Wes's point about reading, like that is absolutely. And growing up, we grew up, on welfare in the Bronx, but the library is free. And so we were in the library all the time. And libraries now are so much more accessible than they used to be. There are so many great apps that you can get on that are free, that you can kind of get the books right there on that. I bring my kids to the library constantly. There's free programs for them. So get to the library. It's a great resource, whether that's virtually or in person. It is excellent to get out there and find those lives that are not yours. It's a really great way to kind of open up that perspective. I'm usually reading like at least 3 things at a time, but it's a busy couple of months right now. So I'm only reading one. And I am actually reading a pretty old book, but it's called Women Who Run with the Wolves. And it's definitely female focused. It's a little metaphysical. It's very interesting. There's a lot of prerogatives in there that are different than I would normally be thinking of. And it was recommended to me. It's a very quick read. Definitely recommend that you check it out. I know the author's last name is Estes, but I forgot her first name. I'm reading that right now. And it really does kind of go into a lot of the dichotomy that we have for ourselves, a lot of the societal constraints that we think we should fit in. But where do we feel that inside of ourselves? Where's the animal energy that we feel inside of ourselves? And how does that perhaps conflict with the way we're supposed to be fitting into society? And how can we go in that direction of being a little bit more, quote unquote, wild, by still creating our own boundaries that work for us, our own structures of support that work for us, while experimenting with being a little bit more of your wild self. So it's kind of actually a little bit relevant to what we're just talking about. Look at that. So I'm reading that right now.
I love that. I love that book. And I'm going to drop it in the chat. I'm looking up so I can make sure I get the authors.
Yeah.
Pincola Estes. I read that book so many years ago in my 20s, and it'll be interesting to revisit it now. So you've inspired me to go back and read that.
Well, I'm going to have to go check it out. I mean, I got a 14-year-old daughter, Rebekah. So I encourage reading. Like I don't even have TVs in my house. We have books, as you can see.
Good for you. Yes.
Books and music.
That's perfect.
But no, I definitely will get into that. What about you, April? I mean, you've been over there. What's been going on?
I've just been listening. I'm trying to think, what have I been reading? You know what? I might be not reading so much lately. There's a book, though, I think I've shared before called Radiant Rest. by Tracy Stanley. And I've gone back to waking up early in the morning trying to read my 10 pages. And she talks about the power of rest. The book is based on a practice called Yoga Nidra. And Yoga Nidra is a practice of, you know, in a yoga class, oftentimes you'll end in a shavasana, a quieting down and, you know, just laying and resting the body. Yoga Nidra is kind of based on that space, getting in that liminal space where you're not awake and you're not asleep, and how you can just really restore, heal, and bring yourself to an awareness. Like oftentimes you get into a practice of resting and you create what she calls this nest. So all the prompts that your body needs to settle into that space. And then you go into a practice and then come out of it and just freestyle journal for like 10, 15 minutes. So I've been reading that and just gathering it in. And so that's been my latest read. And then just listening to, I think I shared Outlive by Peter Attia. I shared with people, I got really sick in the beginning of the year and it took me by surprise. And now I identify with a chronic illness, which I never had in my entire life. So I'm reading his book, and his book isn't about, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. He talks about the history of medicine and how humanity still has not conquered diabetes, high blood pressure, dementia, Alzheimer's, and cancer. And what is it about our lifestyle and our way of being that makes us as humans not able to conquer that? So it's actually been very interesting, and, you know, read about 10 pages a day. That's what I've been into lately.
It definitely sounds interesting. Okay, I'm just saying. I mean, you started off like, I don't really know. I mean, you got a plate full, April. I think you're doing a good job. Okay.
I'm gonna drop all these books in here too for you all. What about you, Wes?
I've tapped back into a couple of Dr. Joe Dispenza books. So one, Becoming Supernatural. I think it's like when I start to speak and I get busy speaking, I don't like to read a lot because I always want to make sure I'm articulating my truth. But this one helps me like understand that I'm a vessel. And so I think like being able to understand that puts me in the uncomfortable rooms, even if I know that they're ready to learn or relearn or unlearn, whatever the case may be. Some rooms are just not where you find a lot of that power and strength because it might be different. And so constantly reading something that allows me to understand my purpose outside of my body, you know, kind of what you were talking about earlier about the internal work and understanding that. So I think even within that has been something. So that's what I've been tapped into. Becoming supernatural. How do you just see yourself past your physical body, and what does that guide you? And so, yep.
I like that.
Good stuff. This is why we need to all we should just all go to New York. I've been looking at New York, Rebekah. I've been on this, like, in my mind, like, I'm just an hour away from New York, right? Aren't we just about an hour and a half?
If you're flying, it's like an hour. Yeah.
6 hours.
Yeah, I drive. See, I would probably.
I'm like, about six and a half.
Right.
Rebekah, any closing thoughts you would like to share with us? I feel like an hour just goes by so fast, and we always say this, and we really mean it. We'd love to have you back, especially as you and I launch.
Yes,
our big
very exciting initiative. Yes, TBD. Nothing prolific, nothing like mind-blowing. I think that just having these conversations is the most important thing we can keep doing. So I hope that all of you that have been watching today continue this conversation. You know, get with your friends, get with your loved ones, your people, your peers, your coworkers, and just continue to talk. The more that we talk to each other, the more that we share our perspective and we listen to others' perspectives. That's the way that we keep this moving. So just keep talking. Everyone keep talking.
And where can people find you and learn more about you and the work you do, and then also with the opera itself?
Sure. So you can Oh my gosh. You can look me up on my consultancy website, diazinclusion.com. That's my consultancy. There's a lot of information up there about me and about what we're doing. We can always put a little more information up there. And then with Pittsburgh Opera, if you just go to pittsburghopera.org, there's a lot of information about the initiatives we've got going on, our programs. You're always welcome to reach out to me directly if you have questions about anything that we're doing or want to get involved. I'm happy to connect with you and talk with you at any time about what's happening with any of those things.
I love it. Listen, and you're doing the work, and I so appreciate it. And thank you for letting me be a part of that work. And thank you for joining Wes and I. Listen, if anybody wants any of us, Wes is a big speaker, so you can. What is it? I am Wesley Hamilton. Is that the website?
Oh, my website, wesleyhamilton.life.
Yeah. And you hear, thank you for putting that on there. Like Marissa, only share that last one that she put on there. I hope to have you all on. Well, not Wes, you and I are on all the time. But we do hope to have you on, Rebekah, and also collaborate and do more with you. You and I will go for coffee. Maybe I'll come back to the Opera House and you could teach me a little.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I'll bring Wes too. We could teach both.
Absolutely. I'm rolling.
Oh, yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Really appreciate the knowledge and educating me on some things today. So truly grateful.
Oh, and likewise, Wes, likewise. I'm going to take a lot of that and put it in my pocket for later. So I appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
Thank
All right,
you.
everybody.